Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm back with another quick list video. We're going to be talking about 5 DC Comic must-read hidden gems. For the sake of today's video, I also selected books that were not omnibus format. I tried to get kind of smaller paperback or standard hardcover editions to just kind of vary my format choice, mix it up a bit for myself. Anyway, I can't wait to get started. I know I just recently dropped a list like this for Marvel Comics, so I knew DC was right around the corner. Anyway, I'm sure my list will surprise some, but I can't wait to dive in. Before we do though, I want to shout out the channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see anything there you like, you can use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but that's a fantastic way to support the channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's list. In no particular order, we're going to go ahead and dive in with Batgirl and Robin Year 1. Now these are two separate graphic novels or mini-series I have collected in this single trade paperback. This edition is out of print, but I believe they've reprinted these separately fairly recently. Don't quote me on that, but I think I've seen them around. But both of these mini-series are fantastic, and honestly, having the moniker of Year 1, it obviously has huge shoes to fill. Obviously immediately evoking the Batman Year 1 from Frank Miller from all those years ago. Now, I don't know that this is quite up to Batman Year 1 standards, and yet this is definitely a cut above average. Both miniseries I found to be an absolute treat. With Scott Beatty and Chuck Dixon on writing and a really incredible and talented group of artists, this really is a fun two-pack here. There's definitely some visual continuity between the two miniseries, but overall they can stand alone quite well. As the name suggests, this is the Year 1 stories for both of these crime-fighting sidekicks / heroes in their own right. For Robin Year 1, it's early in our Boy Wonder's career as a costumed crime fighter. We have some notable appearances from some of Batman's rogues gallery, and just some really fun hijinks from Dick Grayson during this era. There's a palpable sense of tension, some great conflict and action sequences, and the artist just knocks it out of the park with this kind of animated feel or cartoony aspect to all of the beautiful illustrations that really just lends something to the tone of this book. I feel like it can cover some pretty heavy subject matter with what goes on with Robin and just kind of all of the turmoil and things that he has to endure, and yet it's done in kind of a playful manner with the art, and it's just beautiful. Similarly, I could say very comparable things for Batgirl. This character is a little bit older. She's kind of a young adult versus a teen, and you got a little bit more maturity with that. Also, having a female-led book and heroine, there is a really decisive voice to this that is obviously super different from Dick Grayson, but I think it's handled just as adeptly, if not more so. Barbara Gordon has so much agency here, and I love how she clashes with both Batman and the Boy Wonder in her own series. I love that she kind of figures out her own costume identity, and I just really like seeing that all come to play. Like I said, these are pretty different from Batman Year 1, but there is a shocking similarity between the two works here. I think that that's why this serves so well in a single collected edition, and I frankly think that both of these stories, and certainly this collection together, is one massive hidden gem. At the time of the recording, I do believe this particular edition is out of print, though I'm sure you can find it on secondary marketplaces. Really worthwhile to read these stories, at least in my opinion, for any fan of DC Comics, and particularly the Bat family. Next on my list is a book I try to showcase here and there. This is Nightwing Volume 1, Traps and Trapezes of DC Comics' New 52 run. This was written by Kyle Higgins and illustrated by the incredible Eddie Barrows. I just love the illustrations throughout this. I think Barrows knocks it out of the park. There is such a sense of motion in this comic. The way he plays with the paneling and breaking the traditional panel format was just really eye-catching, and yet it was so easy to follow the flow of actions and just the scene in general. I really have to commend him for that. The character models are also stylish, beautiful, and just really intense. I really like what we get with this series. And Kyle Higgins at the helm, I will say when this was first coming out, this was my my introduction to Kyle Higgins. He's of course gone on to do other prolific work, notable works like Power Rangers or Radiant Black. But this was written kind of before all of that, and this was still a really worthwhile little run here for New 52. I think for fans of Dick Grayson, I would consider this more or less a must-read. I know there's been a ton of Nightwing runs throughout the years. I feel like Chuck Dixon and the really popular current Tom Taylor run probably get the most accolades, and yet I think that this is one that gets really slept on, if I'm honest with you. I know some people don't like the black and red suit. I know I'm quite partial to the black and blue myself, but hey, there's something to be said about the redesign. It still is really fun. But this run is really good. I really don't know why more people don't read it. This is a volume 1 of a 5-volume trade paperback set that collects the entire run. They did have an omnibus that's been long out of print, at least at the time of the recording. I'm having my fingers crossed that someday we see a reprint. We'll see what happens, DC Comics. But for me, I really like this. For those that don't know, the New 52 was an initiative from DC Comics that basically gave a soft reboot or relaunch to their whole universe, where they got to cherry pick the aspects of their continuity they wanted to hold on to, and everything else was kind of a refresh or something a little different based on what the writers wanted to do, basically. All of the characters are a bit younger than the traditional DC universe, and this all happened after the Flashpoint event. I like the New 52 because I think it's a fantastic way to jump onto new series, new characters, and if you're a new reader, this was one of my favorite on-ramps to become a DC Comics fan. Admittedly, I am biased because when the New 52 first launched, I was actually getting into comic collecting myself for the first time, so admittedly, I do have a huge soft spot in my heart for this era of DC Comics, and I think that when a lot of people pass over this era in general, it's ripe for just hidden gems, and I think that Nightwing, even within the kind of New 52 milieu, is often overlooked, and I don't think that should be the case, especially with a character that's just becoming more and more popular over time. Don't miss out on the New 52 Nightwing. Okay, next up on my list is perhaps my oldest. This is the DC Universe by Alan Moore. This is a standard size hardcover edition that you can still find around here and there. For whatever reason, I never hear people talk about this collection, and I think it's really fantastic. Alan Moore is, of course, a very prolific comic book writer. Some of my favorite works from him include things like the Saga of the Swamp Thing, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Watchmen, and that's just to name a few. Now, he does have his fingers over a lot more of the mainstream DC universe, and yet it's never really been collected in a way like this, at least in my mind, and this book really is a fun and eclectic mix of just his written works across the DC universe in general. We have stories about Batman and Wonder Woman, a good handful about Superman that I think are actually the pinnacle of this collection. We have some great appearances by Swamp Thing, actually. We have the Green Lantern Corps show up in varying degrees, and there's a couple more than even just that flipping through this collection. Why I like this is it's a great way to see Alan Moore's range within one of the big two publishers. Yes, I loved his ongoing run on Swamp Thing that ran for some time, but to see him just write an issue or two here for a given series, it just really brings something else out in his writing. Just seeing what he can do just on that month-to-month just issue or maybe 2-issue kind of framework. I really do like these stories, like I said, what I've read here. I know what's the story called with Superman, I think, For the Man Who Has Everything or something like that, where there's the plants that put Superman in kind of a catatonic dream state. It's a really well-known story. I think they even did a DC animated episode of Justice League about it at one point or something. But really fun story there. Great appearance from Mongol. But yeah, this is just a really great book. I think it's a hidden gem. I do think that Alan Moore is one of the best comic book writers of all time, and seeing him just try his hand at just your mainstream DC books, it's just a fun collection. And like I said at the top, I just don't see anyone talking about this book. It's still pretty readily available. Last I checked, it was fairly cheap, and yet again, I think it's just passed over. But I think if you're a fan of Alan Moore and you're a fan of DC Comics in general and just a large array of their character roster, this might be a collection worth picking up. And hey, while I have your attention, if you're enjoying this video and you've yet to subscribe to the channel, I would just like to invite you to do so. I'm always doing list videos like this, comic book reviews, I'm even dabbling in shorts and live stream here and there. Anyway, thank you for considering. Now on with the show. Next up, we have one of my favorite Superman stories I've had the pleasure of reading in recent years. This is Superman American Alien by Max Landis. Now, this to me was recommended 100% by a comment on the channel. I had a couple people kind of emphasize that comment throughout the years. It would show up in different recommendation posts, things like that. Finally got a copy of this at a used bookstore, and wow, was I not disappointed. This is set earlier in Superman's career. It's one part origin story, but more than that, a coming-of-age sequence of vignettes. What we have here is Max Landis writing a bunch of different Superman short stories, each issue comprising a kind of standalone story that has a particular artist, only to have the next issue with a totally different artist in a different period in Superman's life. So we begin with his childhood in Smallville, Kansas, as his powers begin to manifest and his parents aren't really sure what to do. He feels completely other and alien in his own skin and hometown and even in his family unit. And then we have another story that's kind of his adolescence, where he gets kind of embroiled in sort of a really intense crime, kind of murder scene. Really just jaw-dropping one there. We have a kind of gritty, beautiful art style that's really different than that previous childhood story that was much more animated and cartoony. After that, we have kind of his young adulthood, where he's on sort of a pleasure cruise. I won't spoil too much about that, but it's a very remarkable story as well. And then finally, we land in Metropolis, and we have some of his early meetings with some of the main Superman cast of characters, like Lois Lane, Lex Luthor, things like that. And then we kind of cap this book with kind of a story or two where he is Superman proper, albeit a bit newer in that lifestyle. What I love about this collection is that you have a consistent character voice from Landis, even as the artists change hands, and lend a really intense sense of variety to this collection. To me, this really reads like a short story collection that all has that loose theme of Superman. It is written in more or less chronological order, tracing him from a little kid to a young Superman. And what can I say? The stories just really work for me. There's a lot of heart here, a lot of personality. The Superman we get is playful, in some cases unsure, and yet he has that moral core that just really keeps him on the straight and narrow. The artists that are also attached to this book are phenomenal. I think we had Joel Jones next to Jay Lee, next to, you fill in the blank. There's just some incredible artistic talent attached to this, and I love the variations we get in art style. It's a beautifully put together little standard size hardcover, and frankly, it was, like I said at the top, this was one of my favorite Superman reads I've had in recent years. Absolutely stunning, and I think more people need to check this out, especially for Superman fans. Don't miss out on Superman American Alien. And last but certainly not least, we have the Batman One Bad Day Ra's al Ghul little one-shot here by Tom Taylor and Ivan Reis. This was part of that One Bad Day, I don't know if we call it an event, that thing they did over at DC Comics. I know they released a giant box set for One Bad Day. I actually did a full review of it. It was my longest YouTube video on the entire channel at the time of this recording. If you're interested in checking that out, I'll try to link it to this video. But yeah, this is One Bad Day, Ra's al Ghul, and for me, this was a highlight in this collection. This is probably in my top 3 of the stories that got presented. For those that don't know, One Bad Day was kind of taking the model of Alan Moore's Killing Joke, which basically had kind of a Joker origin story, and it explored this idea of anyone is just one bad day away from kind of becoming a twisted villain like the Joker. And taking that line and that premise, we have a bunch of these industry top professional creators, each taking kind of their own stab at one of Batman's rogues gallery in a kind of overlong one-shot special issue. Those were then put in standard size hardcovers, and for me, they were found in that box set. And this is what we get for Ra's al Ghul. And yet, this is a far cry from the Killing Joke. Some people took that notion and really played fast and loose with what that could mean. And I think that this is one that doesn't feel like it's trying to be too close to that One Bad Day formula. Like in the case of One Bad Day, the Riddler, which is very very obviously an homage to The Killing Joke in a way I thought was very effective as well. But no, what we have with Ra's al Ghul here is basically Ra's trying to do his latest feat for kind of steering the future of the world. He has a very utilitarian standpoint and is trying to just shape humanity and where it's going based on what he thinks is going to be best for the overall good, even if it justifies some really horrific murder and things like that. In the midst of this plot that is pretty sophisticated and clandestine, we have Batman and Robin, which is Damian Wayne at this point, kind of catching wind to what's going on. Conflicts ensue. I won't spoil too much here. There's a lot of really fascinating twists and turns, even across this one shot. But we get a really good look into the mind and kind of psyche of Ra's al Ghul, who is, in my mind, one of the most terrific Batman villains of all time. He's so cerebral and daunting and just has such a global, international reach. It's just really fascinating. I think he's such a good foil for Batman. I think he's such a good member of his villains. And especially when you have Damian Wayne, the son of Batman, having a direct, grandfather link to Ra's, it also adds just a ton of weird family drama, which is even displayed here. Tom Taylor is one of my favorite comic writers in the industry right now, and I think he just really delivered here in just really a short format. I think it's really fantastic, and I think a lot of people breezed over One Bad Day, and I think even more don't really speak about this title, and I think it's absolutely worthwhile, especially for fans of Batman or Ra's al Ghul, of course. And with that, I've already rounded out my list for 5 DC Comic must-read hidden gems. This is by no means an exhaustive list. In fact, I tried to be a bit eclectic, picking a little bit of this and that I just happen to enjoy, that I think deserve more love or more discussion. But there's so many I could have added to this list. Like I said, I overlooked any kind of omnibus edition. I tried to pick more modern choices, but I also try not to be too strict on that. I just looked at my bookcases and just thought, what are really good books to showcase in here? And this is what I picked. But this is where you come in. I would love to hear what are some of your favorite DC Comic hidden gems. And but what I mean by that is, what is a book you thought was fantastic that was put out from DC Comics that you don't hear people talking about as much, or you wish people would reevaluate, or what have you? Let's get some recommendations going in the comments. I would love to get some discussion going. Have you read any of my picks? What do you think is absolutely left off the list? Let me know all of that in the comments. I'd love to start talking to all of you about that. And for anyone looking for books to read from DC, I'd love for the comments to just have recommendation after amazing recommendation. Thank you so much again for watching. It means the world to me. I'm still having a blast with these list videos, but let me know, is this the kind of content you like to see on this channel? Again, always appreciate that feedback, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, comment, and maybe share this video with a friend. Thanks so much. Have a good one.